Unpacking the EU Migration and Asylum Pact, how to make it work amid this sharp rise in migration. Welcome to the EPP Group talk here in the European Parliament in Strasbourg on this issue. And joining us are two MEPs who are on the Libe Committee. That's the Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee. Lena Dupont from Germany, EPP Group Vice Coordinator, that's Deputy Spokeswoman on Libe issues, and also Jeroen Lenaers from the Netherlands, who is the EPP Group Coordinator or Spokesman. And give it a bit of background here from Frontex. Their figures are irregular entries into the EU rose about 20% in the first 8 months of this year to over 230,000. And in that figure, the crossings across to the central Mediterranean, I think Lampedusa, nearly doubled. The UN International Organization for Migration, IOM, lists 2,800 dead or missing, mostly in the central Mediterranean so far this year. Quite tragic. In the meantime, we have this migration pact that would distribute asylum seekers among the EU 27, and if any country refuses, doesn't want to take them in, they have to pay a certain amount for each migrant that is not taken in, that is taken in another EU country. So let's get to the crux of the matter. First, talk about how serious this is, and let's talk to Lena, because you were on the ground in Greece, in Lesbos, for instance, the island of Lesbos that takes in a lot of migrants. How serious was the situation when you saw it?
Well, actually, we are discussing a bit the situation back then, I would say, because in the meantime, a lot of things had happened, especially on the Greek islands, with the support of the European Union. But we see that at different spots at the European external border, for sure. So you can draw some lessons from that. First of all, when I was on the ground, it was shortly after the burning of Moria. So a really devastating situation for the people on the ground. But at the same time...
That was a reception center or
It was a reception center, yes.
That burned down.
That was burned down, apparently by refugees, by asylum seekers themselves.
Yeah.
But it, of course, was a hint at the very tragic situation on the ground unfolding there.
Right.
Which was one of the causes why the European Union decided to step in order to get support, also from the local authorities, but especially in cooperation with the Greek government, the then Greek government, because there was a very important change in government in the meantime, in order to cooperate better and to build up facilities which are up to our standards. And you really are, and I've seen one of them on Samos, so another Greek island as well, where we also had devastating experience on the ground, but with a new reception center, with the new buildings and with a new concept that is behind it, we really are at the forefront of addressing not only the most problematic issues, but also guaranteeing that everything that comes out of reception is up to the European standards.
Okay, so there's a major effort by the EU to make this work, and also with this new migration pact. Jeroen, tell us about this migration pact. I briefly mentioned it.
How long have you got?
Yeah, I know, that's the thing. Not much. So this is top line, man.
I mean, the pact in itself consists of a number of legislative proposals, which are all very important and they're all relatively complex. I think what is important is that the European Union has realized that the old system was not functioning. In the old system and the system we still have now, it seems to be people smugglers who decide who can enter the European Union rather than EU member states deciding who can enter the European Union. And this is because paying a people smugglers sometimes up to $5,000, $6,000 to risk your life, as you already said, on the Mediterranean is an automatic entrance ticket to the European Union. And I think the European Union has realized now that has got to change. So in the new pact, you already spoke about better solidarity within the European Union, but it also really enforces our operations at the external borders of the European Union. So in the new system, the idea is that everybody who arrives at the external borders of the European Union will initially stay at the external border. We'll have a screening there, which is one proposal. We'll check your identity, your health, security check, and then we make a distinction between people coming over to the European Union that are likely in need of international protection.
Right.
And we will make sure
Asylum.
those people will be divided evenly across the European Union.
Right.
And we make a division between people coming over who are not in need of international protection, people coming from countries with a very low recognition rate, countries like Morocco, Bangladesh, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Tunisia itself.
Right.
And this group of people, so those who are not entitled to asylum, most likely, they will stay at the external border in a border procedure which is accelerated and can then also be returned from the border. So then the pact is basically improving the way we managed migration internally and improving solidarity and responsibility sharing in the EU, while at the same time we make sure that we make a division between those people arriving at Europe's border that really need our help and those that come for other reasons. And I think that's the main gist of it.
Now, this agreement, this pact, is not yet in the bag, right? It still has to be negotiated, doesn't it, Lena? And up to now, we've been hearing a bit of foot dragging, quite a bit of foot dragging from Hungary and Poland. But now with the new election there and with that referendum that failed, what does that indicate? Does that indicate maybe less resistance?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say less resistant because the discussion itself needs to be done. And we need to still go forward with the discussion at European level because, like you just said, we are not there at a concluded pact yet. So we're still in the negotiation phase.
Yes.
We're very tied to an end, quite tied to an end, so to say. But we're still in the phase of concluding the agreements. Of course, we have the roadmap, which was concluded by all three institutions, and everyone needs to abide to that, of course. But when you look at what changes and what had changed with the past weekend with the elections in Poland is that when you actually look a bit closer at the referendum, it was diverted away from, I think, at around 40%.
Yes.
And you should have needed 50%. So
yeah.
it was a clear message also from the people that actually they are really looking for a solution. But they're not looking for a populistic, short-sighted solution, but really work on the ground with the things that we have. And this, we of course, need to use for the European discussion as well.
A positive indication. But Jeroen, you talked about traffickers now, but can we really? You want to add something to that?
First on this, because like Lena says, it is of crucial importance that we do conclude this pact right now.
Right.
We all remember 2015, 2016, we had a huge crisis.
Yeah.
We all went into the European elections 2019 with empty hands. Migration is an issue that has been on the top of the minds of European citizens for the past 7-8 years. And we cannot afford to have a European election campaign in 2024 where we again have to tell the people, I'm sorry, but we didn't manage to solve it. So we need to solve it now. We have a couple of months left to do so. And this is also our commitment from the EPP, we will do everything in our power, day and night, Saturdays, Sundays, it doesn't matter, to get this pact done. Yeah,
so the clock is ticking on that. But the traffickers, you mentioned the traffickers and how they're making lots of money from that. But there are others who argue, some who argue, that no matter what you do about the traffickers, these migrants will keep coming.
I think it's an illusion to promise anyone or to even want it as a future view that we're going to stop migration altogether.
Right.
There will always be people who will find a way to come to another country even if they don't have the necessary papers. But the way it happens now, where people are dying in the desert, people are dying on the Mediterranean because they have put their fate in the hands of unscrupulous people smugglers whose only interest is to make a business model out of the vulnerability of people. And this needs to be stopped. And we have an action plan against people smuggling here in the European Union. It's important, we support that. But the truth is also that if you really want to fight people smugglers, you need to cooperate with the countries of origin and transit. You
Yeah.
need to cooperate with the authorities there, and you need to cooperate with the communities and offer those communities a different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. That leads me to my next question. And Lena, I think it's especially interesting to ask you because you were in the Bundestag in 2015 when you saw that first wave of migration during the Syrian conflict. And just lately, we see Spain says that in the Canary Islands, over 8,500 came in October alone. Over 23,000 since January, that's up 80%. Frontex says it's in part because of a push factor from political instability in nearby Senegal. So a lot of people are fleeing political instability, wars, dictators, climate change. Are we doing enough to deal with those root causes?
Well, actually, probably let me divide it a bit in two parts,
Yeah, it's
because
quite
we
a
discussed a lot
big thing,
on the
yeah.
Pact, on the internal dimension of the European Union, but
Okay.
integral to the Pact as well, and we've been advocating for that for quite a long time as EPP, is that we also have the external dimension of the Pact. And
Yeah.
I would say what we need to do and what we're trying to do with the Pact is somehow to establish this line of responsibility in order to cooperate better with countries of transit, countries of origin, in the sense of the European Union will not be able to flee out of their geographical position. We will
Sure.
stay there where we are,
Yeah.
which means, of course, we need to elaborate more and in a more, let's say, in a more integral part also, like the Team Europe approach that we have at European level for this term first, that we concentrate on how to bring together the instruments we have at hand in order to help the countries of origin, countries of transit, address the root causes that in the end lead then to the movement to the European Union. And this is, of course, an important part of the Pact, of the external dimension
Yeah.
as well.
So that means development, that means
It
trying
means
to improve
development. It, of
conditions.
course, also means economic support. It
Yeah.
also means discussions about whether we can use legal migration as a toolbox, as a tool in the toolbox as well, which is, of course, a bit sidelined or on the side of the Pact then
Right,
itself.
right. Another aspect is about the humane treatment of asylum seekers. And Jeroen, you mentioned about the third countries. There is that agreement with Tunisia that some are questioning because the government is been criticized for not being entirely democratic. How do we deal with that? How do we ensure the humane treatment in countries like Tunisia?
You know, I would love to have a situation where the European Union is surrounded by model democracies. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And if the European Union could only cooperate with countries that have the exact same level of democracy and rule of law as we have internally, then we cannot cooperate with anyone. So the reality is that we need to cooperate with these countries. And I am a strong believer in the fact that we can improve reception conditions, we can improve the safety of people in Tunisia and in other countries much better when we cooperate with these countries, instead of when we're saying, we don't like
Just
you,
shutting them out.
do your own thing, we will not get involved. It's an illusion to think that people in Tunisia would be treated better if the European Union would say, we will not cooperate with you.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
need
look at
this.
Turkey. You know, we're dealing with Turkey too, right? That's not entirely.
And if you look at
democratic
Turkey, in Turkey, the European Union has invested heavily, over 6 billion euros in the past years, to help Turkey receive refugees from Syria and other countries in a humane way, where kids can go to school, where they get the healthcare they need, et cetera, et cetera. And this is exactly what you need to do with third countries as well. But the reality is you need to do it together if you want it to succeed.
Yeah, and then what about Frontex? Frontex, we have, I just saw at last word, about 2,700 standing officers. We want to get it up to 10,000 by 2027. That's a long time. How can we speed that up? I mean, they're supposed to be there to help the national governments deal with crises, right?
I mean, I think when you look at it from the EPP point of view, we've been always advocating for a strong agency. We've been always fighting for a proper functioning agency
Right, more
who can
powers.
do
Right.
the job on the ground, which is a very sensitive one.
Yes.
And we've seen a lot of discussions around that. But the very core essence of the agency is whatever we can do to support them, to strengthen them, we need to do, because they're an integral part of our external security and internal security, of course, as well. So we need them in our portfolio of dealing with security questions and crisis. So whatever we can do to support Frontex needs to be done. When you look at the building up of the standing core, of course, we are at a comparatively low level for the time being compared to the time when it was decided. But it also needs a lot of training. We cannot send someone around who hasn't been trained. So we are a bit in limbo there in order to guarantee the quality and the support for the officers themselves, because they are out there on the border defending the European Union, and they need to be equipped for that. They need to be trained for that.
Right.
And at the same time, we need to speed up the process as such in order to get more member states on board in fulfilling their promises also to the European agency in sending officers. So it's also a question where member states can do more than they're actually doing now, because in the end, we need everyone on board in order to protect the border.
Now, I got to raise the issue of pushbacks, because Frontex came under fire for that, being complicit with some countries that were doing that. Does this pact deal with that at all, or is that something separate that needs to be dealt with, right?
Well, the pact, of course, in every separate part of the pact, it is very clear that whatever the EU or EU agencies or member states do has to be in line with international agreements and international law. And this includes that the principle of non-refoulement needs to be respected, etc.
Refoulement is sending back.
You cannot send back people to a country without a process if their safety is at risk there. But the question is, of course, whether this is the case. Lena is the chair of the Frontex scrutiny working group here in the Parliament. This group has done a very deep investigation into some of the allegations and had to conclude in the end, which was voted here in the Parliament as well, that there is no proof of direct involvement of Frontex in these kind of pushbacks. Also, we see that Frontex now has new leadership, very focused on the operational side of business, very focused on this very important point that Lena makes, that yes, we need to get to 10,000 border guards, but they need to be well-trained, well-equipped to do their job, because you better have 5,000 really well-equipped border guards than 10,000 people who don't know what they're doing. So yes, as quick as possible, but as good as possible. And I really think, and you hear this from everybody, that there is a breath of fresh air in Frontex. They're really focused on their core task, helping member states protect the borders of the European Union.
And maybe if I can just shortly add to
Lena,
that,
please.
because what we've seen in the past was that actually a political conflict around the question how to organize effective border controls with the principle of non-refoulement was actually placed on the burden of the agency, so on the officers on the ground. And this is something that we really urgently need to also address, and where the Commissioner Johansson also needs to be a bit more flexible, I would say, in picking that up, because it is indeed a very important question, but we cannot wait for a court to clarify what actually might be in 5 or 10 years' time then the solution, because we have the officers on the ground, and they urgently need our political support and backing for what's their task.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is very key. I want to repeat that, because what Commissioner Johansson does, we have a regulation for border surveillance at sea. There are a number of provisions in that regulation that tell member states what they can and cannot do, but they're not very clear. Frontex asks Commissioner Johansson, could you give us guidance as to how to interpret this legislation? And Commissioner Johansson simply says, not my job, ask the courts. And then we are in lengthy procedures before we get any clarity. And at the same time, member states' border guards, Frontex are left in a legal limbo and not sure what exactly they can or cannot do. And it's
so there
a
needs
complete
to be action on that.
it's a complete denial of responsibility that Commissioner Johansson has and that she should take.
Okay. Let's go further on this returns, on the refoulement, as they say in French. That about, figure here, 500,000 were ordered to return home, but the return rate is only 20%. I'm looking at some commission figures. How do you improve that beyond the 20%?
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. It has huge implications on the way we can manage migration, and in some individual cases, it has huge problems, repercussions for security as well. I mean, we're in a week now where we've had 2 terrorist attacks in the European Union, yesterday in Belgium, Friday in France. Both of the perpetrators had an asylum request rejected and were told to return to the country of origin.
Yes.
Both stayed in the European Union regardless of our rules and regulations. So it has implications for the way we manage our asylum systems, but it can also have implications for our security. So we really need to step this up. We need to be more united in the European Union. We need to speak with one voice instead of 27 different national ministers with different interests traveling abroad to make individual deals. We need to speak with one voice, have a European Union agreed partnerships with countries of origin and transit that also includes the return of people who do not have the right to stay in the European Union. We have these agreements in many treaties. They're not implemented in practice, and we need to start doing that as soon as possible.
Okay. I'm kind of running out of time, but I want to look at integration, the labor and skills gap that that Europe is facing as the baby boomers retire. It's 2 things, right? In fact, I mean, I saw a very interesting Economist headline saying Europe is stuck in a need-hate relationship with migrants. Now, I don't expect you to say that, but it is a dilemma, isn't it, Lena?
Well, actually, I indeed wouldn't choose that word, of course, but the question is whether you said something about there are 2 sides.
Yeah.
So you have asylum and you have migration, in brackets, legal migration. And these are completely different things. So when you look at asylum, it's a protection tool. When you look at legal migration, it's something where we are not reacting to an external shock to a certain extent, but we can have a proactive approach to it, meaning that we can set the criteria on which kind of ways legal migration and also labor market integration then is possible. And we also have a regulation on that. We also have discussions on that, which are part of the legal migration package, so to say, where we clearly say that it needs to be the member states who really then can say who is needed at national labour markets and who can come under what conditions.
Right.
What we can do at European level is, of course, speed up procedures, digitalize procedures, so that member states are faster in approaching those people they want to. And what we can do is support the matching of labour market needs and skills of those who are interested to come. But it needs to be separated then, of course, from asylum as such, because it's a completely different group, completely different interest in that.
Right. And coming back to the Pact, does the Migration Pact deal with that directly, or is that something on the side?
Not directly, but next to the Migration Pact, there is also a legal Migration Pact. Lena is much more into the details than I am, where we also talk about this need for improving our efficiency when it comes to legal migration. And of course, what is very important, if you're going to make partnerships with third countries, many of the third countries are interested in possibilities for legal migration as well. So it should also be a topic on the discussion table in those kind of settings. But Lena is the expert in the EPP on this.
Okay, I think we ought to wrap this up, lightning round between the 2 of you. What's the next step? I mean, we see a European Council meeting coming up. That's going to be a big key move in getting that Migration Pact on the rails. Lena, any?
Well, of course it is. I mean, like Jeroen just said a few minutes ago, it's whatever we can do to drive this forward, we will do as EPP. So whether it's Saturday, Sunday, day and night, we will do our utmost to really conclude by the end of the year, by the end of the term. So there will be a lot of work that needs to be done in all 3 institutions, by the way, meaning that also the member states need to live up to that. But of course, also here in the House, between the political groups, we really need to get this done because, as Jeroen just said, we promised to deliver on that. So it's in a prerogative that we do so.
Jeroen, last word. Do you think there's enough consensus in this House and also among the EU27 heads of state, the Council, to make this happen by the end of the year?
I mean, we are further ahead than we ever were in the past 8 years. So I am positive. And I'm also positive that in this House, we will not find consensus. We will never find consensus. But we will find a constructive majority of pro-European parties that will get this over the finish line.
Okay, great. Lena, Jeroen, thank you so much, and thanks to all
Thank
of
you.
you for watching, listening. This is the EPP Group's talk on migration. At EPP Group for the social networks and eppgroup.eu for more information. I'm Chris Burns. See you next time.